IVM.
Hi, I'm Zarina Poonawalla, your peak performance coach, life coach, emotional intelligence practitioner, and NLP practitioner. I'm also the founder of Abzo Expertise Unique, and my organization constantly aims at building leaders across continents. After having worked with so many dynamic business honchos, entrepreneurs, startups, CEOs, management gurus, parents, and student communities worldwide, I am convinced that every individual has unleashed potential. And all we really need to do is realize it. Watch the magic unfold, enhance quality of life, relationships, and professions. On my show, be ready for some riveting conversations with inspirational people, snippets, stories, and much more. So here I am on this exceptional journey to find empowerment and inspiration anywhere I can. Come join me on this breathtaking path of self-realization, potential maximization, positivity, and most of all, embrace your inner power. You are on your way to empowering yourselves. Welcome to the Empowering Series with Zarina Poonawalla. Hello and welcome to the Empowering Series with me, Zarina. On today's episode, I'm in conversation with an erudite and scholarly counsel at the Bombay High Court. Please welcome Ranbir Singh. Hello, Ranbir.
Hi, Zarina. How are you?
I am good, thank you. How have you been?
All well. Interesting times we're living through.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm pretty sure law and order is keeping you busy in these times.
To a limited extent, in the sense that the courts are not functioning to their full capacity, at least in Bombay.
Right.
And it's a different scenario, and like every other aspect of our lives, the law and the courts have also been entirely shaken up and disrupted by the current situation.
Mm-hmm. So, you have primarily been into, commercial law, and of course, we're seeing very different times these days. What's the journey been like, and how has it been different through the last few months?
So I do commercial litigation, and I'm a counsel in the Bombay High Court.
Mm-hmm.
So it has been completely different in the sense that courts haven't been functioning uh, at all, in the sense that they've been functioning in an extremely limited capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And what that has meant is that, as we all know, in any case, there has been a huge pressure on the courts in terms of backlog and pending cases. But that has been further accentuated by the current situation. And also, the current situation has, at least in the, definitely in the sphere of commercial law as well, and commercial disputes, has given rise to a whole lot of more disputes because of this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And that has caused great difficulty for people, because there is great uncertainty, because disputes arise out of commercial obligations that parties have with one another, and those obligations have now not been able to be performed in many cases, or one can imagine difficulties posed by the current situation, and therefore has given rise to a whole lot of disputes and difficulties between people. At
Right.
the same time, access to our courts and justice delivery systems has been severely impaired. So it's caused, this situation, which is difficult and trying for litigants, for judges, and for lawyers as well.
Absolutely. But how are you guys coping with this entire environment? It must be, like you said, it's definitely trying and challenging, but it is what it is for now. So definitely there has to be some way of kind of measuring the system,
Yes, yes,
still
yes,
working your way out,
yes,
right?
yes.
So how have you been coping with
So what's been
with this
happening
situation?
currently is that there is a limited virtual court which has been operating,
Okay.
and technology has come to the rescue to some extent. And what has happened is that, it's basically moved to video conferencing with the judges, and very, very urgent matters are being heard. But it has been difficult and it has been trying because it's a completely new system, and litigants, and more importantly, judges and lawyers have not been used to this system. So it's a completely new system. So we are struggling initially with all struggling with the technology, and it's the law has traditionally been, and the practice of law in courts has been traditionally unchanged for many years, and it's always been paper, physical courts, the courtroom exchange, and facets of court practice are so dependent on physical interaction, between judges and lawyers, in the sense that body language is important. It's important to see
Right.
how people are the conviction with which they're presenting their case, and of course the more practical aspects like huge volume of papers, documents. How does one see documents? How do judges see papers on, so it's been difficult, but I think this sort of digitization of records and moving to embracing technology has been talked about and has been on the cards for a long time. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that the current situation has kind of forced us all to embrace it to some extent, because there is currently no other alternative that is safe than to have virtual court hearings. So that's how things have been proceeding. So it's been difficult, it's been limited, but there is some access available to justice and to the courts through this new system, and it's forcing us all to embrace this system.
Right. And the fact is that maybe courts require, and the job requires tangibility. It requires a little bit of activity in person, right?
Yes, it is.
So, is it affecting the work? Is it affecting the way probably lawyers or judges are seeing a case, on video?
Yes.
And is it affecting any of that,
Yes, it
or
is.
are we getting used
It
to
is.
it?
It is because first and foremost, the volume of work that is being taken up by the courts is extremely limited. So therefore, it is, unless there is some very urgent matter, like literally there is some order that you need to protect or preserve something, without which there could be an irretrievable situation.
Mm-hmm.
You really don't have access to the courts, unfortunately, at the moment. And that's one aspect. And the other aspect is, of course, yes, because, at the end of the day, it is difficult to have that court exchange and that typical to and fro, back and forth between the lawyers and the judges, which can only happen in person. So, so yes, it is impaired. It is difficult. There's no doubt about it.
Right, but something's better than nothing, and like they say, the show must go on. So I'm guessing that it's probably in that zone right now. So tell us a little more about your journey personally, Ranbir, in law, and also how commercial law primarily works. Because I'm pretty sure if there are lawyers listening, they would like to know about you. And for laymen and lay people like me, it'll be nice to understand a little bit about commercial law.
Sure, I'll tell you a little bit about what exactly I do and how I came upon this. And
Mhm.
so basically, I decided to become a lawyer because I I thought it was uh, not because of the name of your series, but I did think it was extremely empowering. It was a profession which allowed you to be your own person, and within the law, I chose to do what is called counsel practice, which means that you are hired to argue, or you are engaged to argue cases in court. Uh,
Right.
and what that ends up being is, I realized when I was young and I was thinking about what I should be doing, is that if I do counsel practice and practice law, I am my own asset, I am my own investment, and
Mhm.
I am my own capital, and I therefore will invest in myself, and I will grow as a person and will grow. That's the profession that I want to be in, therefore, which allows me to do that.
Right.
And the other aspect, of course, is that, I thought that law was empowering because you are in a position to affect lives, to cause and effect real change.
Mm-hmm.
And you are close to the action and are able to effect that change directly through yourself, through the courts of law. Because ultimately, our lives and so many things that we take for granted, like our fundamental rights, our fundamental freedoms, are all protected by the courts. And therefore, when you want a remedy to injustice, you as a lawyer can effect that by being a lawyer and by practicing the law. And so far as counsel practice is concerned, I thought that it was, you are at the absolute forefront and front line rather of the practice of law, in the sense that you are actually arguing before a court. The court decides on the rights of people and between people, and ultimately you end up effecting change. So that's why I thought that counsel practice is a good way to go. And
Mm-hmm.
so far as commercial litigation is concerned, I think it's difficult to explain, but basically, I think it can be disputes regarding commercial obligations and rights of people and entities, is what commercial litigation would be, meaning disputes
Mm-hmm.
relating to that. So I started off after law school in Delhi, and I joined the chamber of Akhil Sibal, who is
Mm-hmm.
now a senior counsel himself. But at that time, this was in 2007, he was a young and upcoming counsel himself. I was with him for 2 years in Delhi, and I worked in the Supreme Court and the Delhi High Court on some very, very interesting matters. I was very close to the action, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
We worked on all these FIRs that had been filed at the time against MF Hussain. We worked on some very big commercial disputes, and it was extremely fulfilling and rewarding. But ultimately, I decided to come back to where I was born and brought up, which is Bombay. And I joined the chambers of Navroz Sirvai, who is today and even at the time one of the top senior counsels in the Bombay High Court. And he has a broadly commercial, again, a commercial litigation practice, and also is a great constitutional lawyer. So he has a constitutional law practice as well. So that again is a very interesting area. It opened up a lot of avenues for me. Got to see a lot, and apart from being an excellent lawyer, Navroz was also is an excellent human being. So we got to do a lot of great matters together. Some pro bono, some not. So we did a lot of pro bono work, and also a lot of great commercial work. And I was with him for 7 or 8 years. No, about 9 years. But largely for the last couple of years, I've been independent and doing my own thing. And so I've branched off on my own now. So that's where I am today.
Fantastic, Ranbir. That's very well put. And more importantly, the fact that you have been such an empowered person from the very beginning makes this a perfect match for us, to have you on the show today.
Good to know.
Yes. So you've had experience with various people, you've been mentored and learned, and you've chosen your path very successfully. You did mention some pro bono cases. So, how do pro bono cases typically work?
So it can actually be, when people approach you, it could be a cause, it
Mm-hmm.
could be things that you as an individual are interested in. So, for example, it could range across length and breadth of the legal fields, in the sense that, just to give you an example, there was a batch of matters that we did and that I did personally to help slum dwellers who were being denied their rights by the builder who was in a redevelopment project or a slum rehabilitation project. So to fight for their rights. Now, in that case, they just simply, unfortunately, do not have the means, and they are just too, too uh, poor and unable to afford litigation, because the fact of the matter is litigation is still expensive and in India and out of reach of a lot of people. So they just didn't have anybody, and I mean they had people but they didn't have competent people to represent them. So they needed, their rights needed to be protected. They were fighting for the roof over their heads. So that is one example. Then another example could be, which is a cause which is quite dear to me, which is unauthorized construction. So that is a bane of Bombay city, where whether it is builders or individual entities who have either encroached on land or grabbed land or have built or constructed not in conformity with the building regulations. And what that means is that it has an adverse effect on all of us, because in that sense, it is a public issue. Because if, in a city like Bombay, which is so dense and so crowded, where if you have unauthorized construction, if you allow unauthorized construction, then it affects all our lives, because that just adds to the density, and either you're encroaching on open spaces or you are encroaching on right for air and light of people. So that is one area where we've done some work and fought some cases. Otherwise, it could just be just about anything. So, for example, one of my most cherished matters is where there was a very senior, upright, and honest police officer who, because he was upright and honest and quote unquote apolitical, uh, he was victimized by the dispensation that was present at the time. This was a few years ago, and he was just horribly victimized. He was not granted his due promotions. He was put on what is called compulsory wait, which means he was not given a salary, not given his perks, not given a posting, so given no work, but also not permitted to join private employment, because as a police officer, you can't join private employment. So they were just basically strangling him because he had stood up to certain people and powers that be. So after a long and litigation process, so we believed in him, right? So me and Navroz fought for him for a couple of years. It took court, and ultimately, in a thumping decision against the state of Maharashtra, he was awarded all his back wages, which ran into tens of lakhs of rupees, and his promotion with a severe reprimand to government. So this is a kind of case. I mean, it was so fulfilling for me personally, because you actually got to affect somebody and help somebody, and made a real difference to his life and to justice.
Absolutely. I mean, it could be extremely gratifying to have those kind of moments and actually working so hard towards making sure that justice is properly served and it's given fairly. That there are fair things that happen around you. And this is very sad, but this is a part of society that is not very well addressed amongst us, Ranbir, that there are times when, power is abused and the innocent suffer. So, do you have anything to share with us on that in terms of how does one deal with a situation like that? I mean, lucky for this person, they had you. How about somebody going through a situation where they're being abused because of the power around them, and because probably they're not matching up and conforming
Absolutely.
to their level, right?
Absolutely. And that is also one of the great attractions of our court, because it is a great leveler, in the sense that theoretically anybody should be able to knock on the doors of the court and get justice when justice has been denied to you. And this is exactly what uh, a constitutional court does and should be doing, and
Right.
and which was one of the great attractions for me, because in our system today, where not everything works as it should be, it I thought, at least, the courts are one the last bastion of hope where you can always turn to and try and get justice by and large. And that does happen. So I think that there is hope, and the courts are the answer to a large extent.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, access to justice is a problem, but and unfortunately, unless you're in the know, or if you have access to a good, unless you have access to a good lawyer, it is sometimes difficult. But I think that there are very many great and good lawyers, both junior as well as senior, who are willing to always go out of their way and help. So,
Mm-hmm.
if anybody does need access to justice, they're more than welcome to get in touch.
No, I really feel it's an important conversation to have, because sometimes, see what my dad, I will tell you this.
Yeah,
My dad has usually always told my sister and me from a very young age that try to stay away from three coats, the khaki, the white, and the black. Okay.
right.
Just to make sure that you are, you don't have to get into the rut of things. So sometimes the whole
Yes.
process can be so tedious that people are afraid to get into it. They
No,
get
no, you're
afraid to
absolutely.
involve themselves,
You are
right?
right.
So yeah, how should we just feel a little more comfortable, like, hey, things are happening, and it's going to be a quicker process, and things will be less they will be more transparent, clear. You know how things work, right? So
Right.
it is something. So in the sense, basically, stay away from a doctor for your health, a lawyer, so you don't unnecessarily have to go through the procedures
Yeah.
of court, and of course the police, so that you're not stuck in any kind of a criminal activity. But nonetheless, how does one go forward and feel that confidence, and that, no, I am going to be able to get through this? So I just want a way to probably reach out to people where it's good to come out, it's good to actually address an issue which requires to be addressed, and not kind of shove it under the rug because you're scared of the system you
Yes.
know
So I think it's interesting because it's your dad's example and his
Mhm.
advice to you, very sound as it is also a sad comment on the state of all three of
Yes.
those institutions, whether it is our medical system, legal system, or law and order system, because
Yeah.
what it means is that people, and rightly so, have very little faith in these systems, unfortunately. But I think that so far as the law is concerned and lawyers are concerned, I think so much depends. And look, let me start off by saying that your dad is right, that you should try and stay away from litigation if you can,
As much as possible, of course.
because and that's the advice I give to all my friends, that look,
Hmm.
if you can avoid it. If you can
Right.
settle a dispute, settle it, take a little less, but settle it rather than go to court, because
Hmm.
the system is very difficult, is very, very trying for the litigant, is
Hmm.
expensive. Justice takes a long time, and in many cases it often fails the litigant also, let me say
Hmm.
that as well. But at the same time, it is crucial to get good legal advice, and it is
Hmm.
crucial to find the right kind of lawyers who can tell you realistically what is achievable, what is not, and therefore what are the rights that you can count on, and what is it that you can expect from the
Right.
legal system. And also, let me add that in very many cases, it is the courts that have come to the aid of very many people, and
Right.
especially when the scales are otherwise tilted against an individual, whether it be in terms of money or power or connections or access. So it can be a great leveler. So I think the two things I would say is, it's important to have faith in the system, and
Hmm.
to get to the right lawyer and get the right advice.
Ranbir, I have to say that you have probably given me the most pacifying and most honest answer on this. And kudos to you for doing that. Really, to be honest, it's hard for people to explain why certain thought processes exist in our society and why people fear certain things. But having people like you probably will change the game. And the fact that you're so empowered, and you're in your own way revolutionizing things around you. So I'm pretty sure that that's going to be helpful.
Yeah.
This was very satisfying for me to listen to. I mean, I got my answer.
Okay.
So I'm really happy about that.
Yes.
So, you do obviously have a lot of young lawyers around you.
Yeah.
And the younger lawyers probably have not been able to cope with the situation as well as the senior lawyers, especially with the burning issues around us now these days.
Right.
What's your advice to such, and how do you think that they should kind of make sure that they have their footing in place?
So I think it's an extremely difficult situation. I can only speak for the young litigating lawyers because I really don't know what is the situation in law firms and corporate lawyers. But so far as litigation is concerned, it's really sad because the current situation I think has hit them the hardest. And I mean, including, I mean, we're all in that sense young lawyers, but the absolute newcomers are the worst
Newcomers,
hit
yeah.
because there is much less work, and therefore the more established lawyers or people who already have certain practice which is sort of built up to a certain degree are doing, getting by much better, etc. So I think that you just have to kind of hang on, keep the faith. I know it sounds like just not real tangible advice, but there is absolutely nothing else to do but to have faith that this too will pass, unfortunately. And you have to look at it as a temporary kind of a pause and
Mm-hmm.
just use this time to kind of further your reading, further your knowledge, further one's kind of horizons, and just try and write this through, as difficult as it may be. There really is not much else to say, unfortunately.
Right. But is it important to be resilient in such times? What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I think this situation is going to teach us all a lot about resilience, and
Mm-hmm.
we really have to kind of dig our heels in, not give up,
Mm-hmm.
and just keep positive. And the legal community has been doing a lot to keep people kind of engaged and busy, in the sense that I'm sure, like in a lot of the other fields, there are webinars, there are seniors who are talking and giving lectures on various topics, and keeping people busy and keeping people's minds busy and kind of exercised, and you know uh, just jogging one's intellect also.
Right. And let's say that there are people out there who probably are having certain cases going on, uh, different kind of issues. Because I think in the beginning of this conversation, you mentioned, the rise of situations and the rise of issues happening because of probably going virtual for now, right?
Right.
So, what are those kind of issues, and what should one do if they're kind of facing them currently?
Do you mean for the litigants or for the lawyers?
For both, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So, for as far as litigants are concerned, again, it's just in a lot of ways, for both litigants and lawyers, it's just uncharted territory, right? Nobody
Right.
knows how and where things are going to pan out. A lot of people didn't envisage this situation at all. So, for example, you and me are involved. I'm now talking from a litigant's perspective. Uh,
Sure.
I had a contract with you. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of these disputes that have arisen because of COVID are contractual disputes, and
Mm-hmm.
the catchword amongst lawyers today is force majeure, which is act of God. What happens when there is an uncontrollable act of God, and what is the effect of that on the rights and obligations of the parties to a contract? So
Mm-hmm.
that all depends on what is the wording of the contract, and it has to be seen from a case to case basis. So for example, in rent contracts, to a large extent, it has nothing has really been specified, right? Like, so for example, if I am a tenant taking a premises on leave and license, for example,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the contract in many cases doesn't really provide for what happens to a temporary situation where the tenant is unable to use the office, but he's still in occupation theoretically. So does he pay rent? Does he not pay rent?
Right.
So those kind of disputes. contractual obligations which could not be performed due to this sort of a situation, where, for example, construction contracts, where somebody had to construct a building and hand over houses to somebody, but it could not be
Yeah.
completed because of the COVID situation, because of government intervening. What happens then? What happens to the. So these are the kind of difficulties which unfortunately will have to be assessed and resolved on a case to case basis after the dust settles, and when things normalize. So these are the kind of difficulties that the litigant is facing. But on the other hand, lawyers are facing all kinds of other difficulties because junior lawyers don't have now the virtual court system necessarily means that you
Mm-hmm.
should have access to internet, you should have access to infrastructure to do a virtual hearing, you should
Mm-hmm.
have access to the infrastructure to be able to scan and file large volumes of documents. So in a lot of cases the problem is one of infrastructure and the lack thereof.
Right.
That lawyers, I memean, we are lucky to have that access, but there are so many countless smaller lawyers who are spread out all over. Some are
Mm-hmm.
in far-flung places where there are no internet connections. What do you do? So,
Absolutely.
so those are the challenges facing them. And there is no quick fix, one word or one sentence answer to all of this, unfortunately.
No, but I think you've been quite descriptive about it, and it's something that people can give a proper think to. Maybe it's
Yes,
helpful for the lawyers, the
absolutely. Absolutely. I hope
parties in
so. I
general.
hope so. I
Hmm.
hope so.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. You have, and in fact, it's been quite elaborate in its own form, and this conversation itself has been wonderful so far. And on that note, I want to ask you something personal.
Sure.
What has the lockdown taught you, or what have the last few months? Now we're not,
Yeah, not
you
on the
know,
law.
legally under a lockdown, but naturally we're all taking precautions. But in general, what have the last few months probably taught you personally?
So I must tell you that my wife was 2 months pregnant when lockdown was imposed. So,
Oh,
so, so what it's meant is that I've been lucky enough to spend a lot of time with her, and that's been absolutely wonderful. And so I've kind of learned how to cook, which I never
mhm.
knew how to earlier. I've been cooking for her, and I've had spent time with my dog, but largely I think it's just given us time to pause, and it's to give oneself time to reassess one's priorities and rethink how one wants to go ahead. So for example, we all live such busy lives that I live in a Planet Godrej, which is a big complex near Satrasta, which is like
Yes.
like 350, 400 flats.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to the lockdown, I we barely kind of were not social or not didn't really have personal relationships or friendships with barely any of our neighbors. So we barely knew any of our neighbors, and because
Okay.
we had our own friends and we went to work and we came back and we just kind of lived in this crazy rat race of a life. And what lockdown has meant is that we've made all these wonderful friends and gotten to know all our neighbors much better because we were all forced to be, locked down with one another. So it's been a great aspect of the lockdown where we've kind of discovered all our wonderful neighbors and made some great friends.
This is the first time, Ranbir, I'll probably be saying this on record, but congratulations are in order during such a time. So, congratulations to you.
Thank you.
And I believe that it's really strange and ironic that we are trying to keep social distancing, which is the key to things. But at the same time, we've actually started making personal and human connections.
Absolutely.
It's that's beautiful, and I'm so happy for you to that you've actually had the right space and the right time to spend with your spouse and kind of enjoy the beauty of this time,
Yes.
right? So, congratulations to both of you on that.
Thank you. Thank you
Um,
very much. So, Zarina, I wanted to ask you a couple of things.
now, a couple of things. Okay, shoot.
You gave me a foot in the door, so now I'm going to.
No worries. Shoot. I'm ready.
Okay, so first I wanted to ask you that what is it that empowers you first?
Mhm. Okay. I'll tell you what empowers me, of course, amongst many things, is the fact that I have the freedom of not being allowed. The fact that a lot of people have to be allowed to make their decisions, as women, as men, as spouses, as parents, that you're not allowed things. I have the freedom of not being allowed. I make my own decisions, and I think that is extremely empowering for me. The other thing is the profession that I'm in, it helps me help people and
Right.
help people who want to help themselves. So it's extremely empowering when you know somebody's trying to reach out. They want to get better at whatever they're doing. They want to perform better, be more productive, or feel stronger, and you're able to give them a little bit of help in that direction. That is extremely empowering for me,
That
Ranbir.
that's so wonderful. So my second question is related to your answer really.
Okay.
Is that what is it about your work that you find the one thing that you find most challenging or difficult?
Uh, Mine is a mind work, because the entire aspect of coaching, Ranbir, is sort of cognitive reframing, a little bit of rewiring of the mind for people who think negatively. You're kind of insisting that they start thinking positively. And let me highlight the fact that it is not medicative. So everything I do is non-medicative, right? So that it's not prescriptive. So I can't really give somebody antidepressants and expect them to feel better. I have to work on their mind. So I think the most challenging aspect is to be able to rewire and kind of, calm the chaos in a person's mind and help them to achieve that true potential. I think that is the challenging part.
Right. Very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, but it is, although it's very challenging, sometimes it's very rewarding as well, because when you see people, you see, like for you, when you're seeing somebody who's getting justice and who's being able to feel happy about what they're achieving in life, and
Right.
it's kind of giving them the right path, or it's changing the course, the direction of their life.
Absolutely.
I feel the same way. So basically, I entirely relate to you, of course, in a very different manner. And
No, not
um,
very different actually, but I am absolutely understanding what you're saying.
yeah, it's very, very rewarding to just watch people take because life is all about choosing and consequences of your choices. So just helping them to make the right choices at the right time is very essential sometimes. So
Fantastic.
yeah, that's
Fantastic.
what it all boils down to. But really nice. Thanks for asking me those questions, and thanks for making them two questions. Okay, so since you've asked me that, I should end this conversation with asking you the same question, Ranbir. Uh, what empowers you?
I think that my work empowers me for sure.
Hmm.
My self belief and self reliance empowers me. And I think that most importantly, I think that my support systems empower me, which is
Beautiful.
my loved ones, my wife, my family, which is the most important.
How lovely. That is so beautifully put. And I'm so glad that we could have this conversation. The fact that you were so candid, so honest, so clear. Thank you so much for sharing your acumen with us. And this has been so educational and informative. Probably one of the most informative conversations I've had. So it's going to be
Thank you
great for
so much.
listeners, whether lawyers or not. It's just going to be great for people to get the kind of information you've shared. And you've shared it so transparently and honestly. Thank you for that, Ranveer.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for being on the show, and be well, be safe, be empowered, and look after your wife. And congratulations to both of you. Yeah.
You too. Thank you again.
Thanks, Ranbir.
If you liked this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram.
I hope you enjoyed that show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money and Intel. So, been a really exciting week on the network this week. We've had some really cool stuff. My old friend Vivek Lad was on Storytellers and Storysellers. Definitely do check that out. On Cyrus Said, we had Ashwin Sanghi on Thursday's episode, and Cyrus and myself did a cock and bull, just the two of us. That was fun as well on Monday. Do check that out. Masaba was on Advertising is Dead, which was another really, really strong episode from Varun. And on the sports front, both Edges and Sledges, Football Shitball had some really fun episodes. That's the Football Twaddle. Do check those out as well. And if you haven't been paying attention and you haven't been listening to Smile India in these times, I don't know why you aren't. It's the most uplifting show that you could listen to. It's a short, bite-sized piece of really positive things that happen in India. Do definitely check that out. And with that, we hope to see you again next week.
How many times have you motivated yourself to improve your sleep, or lose weight, or be more productive? How many times have you failed? Hi, my name is Ashton Doctor. Tune into my show, The Habit Coach Podcast, where we focus on creating small, tiny habits to improve your life instead of those big, impossible tasks. So make listening to me a habit every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com or on your favorite podcasting app.